What's going on, guys? Back again on another Thursday, man. I was away for a bit there, just soaking up the rays. Still on beach time a little bit, so as always, running behind to get this thing out here for you guys. But hello once again. Right, so where are we going? First off, I want to do a shout out to a young lady named Big Mama Thornton. And you might not know the name Big Mama Thornton, but she released or recorded a very famous song today, back in 1952. Now, you might not know her version, but you definitely would know the Elvis version, who later redid this song. But I'm going to play hers just for kicks. It's a little tune that you might know called Hound Dog. And this is the original, man. Quite a bit different than Mr. Elvis the Pelvis's version. You can hear it there. So anyway, shout out to Big Mama. All right, moving on. I thought I might wish someone a happy birthday from the music world. None other than Danny Bonaducci. Now, I think most people probably know Danny Bonaducci from the likes of the Partridge Family. Yes? A little bit I think I love you. It's his birthday today, anyways. And yeah, man, what can I say about Danny Bonaducci? I mean, much like many childhood stars, you know, his life became a bit of a hot mess. Problems with drugs, problem with just being a bit of a hothead and acting a fool. So I think he sorted some of that out and, returned to radio as a DJ, and I think he's been fairly successful with that. So, yeah, man, happy birthday to little Danny Bonaducci, redhead hot mess that he is. All right, moving on. That does make me think of something. That makes me think of the most sung song in history. Now think about that for a second. What might that be? And I'm talking all across the world, but particularly in English-speaking countries. But it's been translated and reappropriated many a time. Now, I think I've talked about this song in the past, but I just thought I'd bring it up again because it's kind of an interesting little tale. I am talking about this song that I'm sure everybody knows. The Happy Birthday song, man. Most sung song in all of history. So, like I said, I've talked about this a little bit before, but for a long period of time, Warner Music Group claimed to own the rights to this song. And at certain points in time, they were clocking in thousands of dollars a day in royalties. Now, for the most part, they weren't suing people for copyright infringement in the case of, like, people singing to each other in their homes or anything like that. But if the song was used in a movie or in a public event, they were often, coming out for collecting some dough. And so back in 2016, February, I believe, there was a court appearance, and it was found that those greedy buggers did not own the rights, and they were forced to pay back, I think, upwards of 14 million big ones to people that they had charged for the use of that song that they did not have the rights for. And interesting enough, the judge also weighed in on further proceedings to discern if that song should be put into the public domain. And in fact, the June of that year, he did so indeed decide that, you know what, the song Happy Birthday belongs to all of us, and there is no claim to it. But early on, just as a side note, I found this little snippet discussing the creators of that song. So this was back in the late 1800s. There was a young school teacher named Patty Smith Hill, and her sister Mildred Hill had created a songbook for kindergartners, and it turned out it was quite successful, but in particular one song. Now, this song was not Happy Birthday. It was actually a song called Good Morning to All, but sung in much the same tune. And as it became quite popular, some of the lyrics were deleted or added, and over time it became the Happy Birthday song. So there you go. All about Happy B-Day. All right. Moving on to some more randoms. Here's a definite random one. Now, this stuff comes up all the time in regards to the stock market. Now, I'm not going to claim that I know anything about the stock market. It's pretty weird stuff to me. I don't really understand the ongoings of that, but many a person has tried to figure out how to predict when stocks will go up, when things will be volatile, and I mean, I guess for the most part, the whole game is buy low, sell high kind of thing, right? Well, I stumbled upon this little study. Now, I will say that this study probably shows that there is a correlation, not a causation, meaning that there's a connection here, but it's not that one causes the other. It just seems to coincide. So what this Dr. Philip Mayman and a few other Poindexters did was analyzed the number of beats on average in a song on the Billboard Top 100 charts, and they look back all the way to the inception of the Top 100. It was back in 1958 up to, I think, the mid-2000s, and they correlated that with how the stock market fared shortly thereafter. And they found some interesting things. It turns out that when people are anticipating that the market is going to be volatile and things are going to go a little haywire and there's a lot of uncertainty, people tend to prefer slow, laid back jams. And when they feel that the market is going to be calm, they transversely listen to more upbeat, peppier tunes. So, if you're listening to the radio and there's abundance of slow jams on there, we could be heading for some rough times. So you might want to sell your stocks if you got any. All right. Anyhow, that is that in that regard. Next off, we're going over to Finland. Now, I bug about these guys periodically, but this one I found pretty interesting. This goes back to 2013. An older, longer in the tooth Chuck Berry played a performance long past his prime by all means, and it turned out the crowd left that show very underwhelmed. Turned out Chuck kind of showed up and phoned it in that night. He did not perform to what they felt was his fullest capability. So they took the promoter of the show to court, and they won. I love this, man. So after that, the Finnish people enacted a law which forced promoters to pay back 50% of ticket sales to any concert goer that felt that the performance was not up to snuff. I thought that was pretty cool. So sorry, Chuck, but you didn't come out to play that night, and the Finns weren't having it. So pretty interesting. I talked about the Finns a little while ago, and I mentioned that they have the most metal bands per capita than any other country in the world, which I found pretty interesting. I'm not sure what's going on there, but incidentally, they also every year when the happiness index is recorded, and this is a way of looking at all the nations of the world and looking at how happy their people are. And they look at all sorts of different indicators. Usually the Finns are right up there, up close to the top, if not on top. Some more than once they've been the number one happiest nation in the world according to this index. So, by correlation, that word that I brought up earlier, I could say that, metal makes us happy, according to some nonsense statistics, but I don't think that's true. It makes me happy, but I don't think it makes a lot of people happy. Anyway, maybe that's something to do with the fact that their concerts are better. I don't know. Maybe that makes them happier. I'm not sure. Anyway, I found that one pretty interesting. And just as a side note, when I was looking at that story about the Finns, I stumbled upon an incident back in, I want to say, 2015 or so, maybe a little earlier. The good people in Queensland, Australia, particularly the police officers, decided to have a little fun. There was a full-blown tour of this band playing here, Nickelback. Now, for whatever reason, like 'em or lump 'em, Nickelback has become a very polarizing band. A number of people absolutely hated them with a passion, but they still had a big fan base. I'm not sure what all the hatred is about. Perhaps just because their music became so popular, it was overplayed and people just had enough of it. I'm not sure. Anyhow, the police department in Queensland were on the hatred side, and they actually put out a bolo, big wanted poster, warning people to look out for this Canadian rock band for crimes against music. They warned that it could be hazardous to your ears to listen, and they actually posted this. What shall we call it? A bolo, a wanted poster. I don't know. You can see it there with some drawings of the boys there, and some warnings for crimes against music. So obviously they were just having a little fun there, but I'm sure the boys in Nickelback didn't really appreciate that. But hey, it's all promotion, right? It would have garnered them some attention. And last, I don't know if it showed up there, but there was one more warning that said to avoid the area where they were performing. It may be hazardous to your hearing and street cred. So there you go. No offense to any fans of Nickelback by all means. People are entitled to their opinion. I listen to a lot of stuff that most of my friends and family do not enjoy, and to me it's good music, but to them it's just noise. So there you go. Right. Moving on, we're going way back to the country of Hawaii. Or the state, I guess, in this case now. So we're going back to 1879. And I'll give you a little backstory, and this is going to give us some origins of an instrument that is certainly synonymous with Hawaii. and I'll play a little. I won't play any just yet because I want to bury the lead a bit here. A ship of Portuguese laborers, a ship called the Ravenscraig, had pulled into Honolulu, and these Portuguese men were from a small island called Madeira. I'm probably mispronouncing that. And they were heading to the Hawaii's sugar fields. And it turned out they also brought more than their hard work, but they brought music. And at nighttime, there was many reports of these young Portuguese men performing on the street corners. And the townspeople in the area were absolutely enthralled with this strange instrument they were playing, which they said was somewhere between a banjo and a guitar, but a tiny one at that. And you might know where this is headed. And it's fair to say that that little instrument struck a chord with the Hawaiians. Of course, that instrument I will play a little snippet of here. A little tune by Jason Mraz. If you listen closely, there's some guitar, but there's also something else there. That, of course, is the ukulele. A guitar-like instrument that I think now is synonymous with the Hawaiian people. And we'll get into that a little bit further, but at the time, the Hawaiian people, the Portuguese referred to their instrument as a machete, interesting enough. But the Hawaiians called it a taro patch fiddle. And by the 1890s, it had been christened with a new name, the ukulele. And, that's a well-known instrument in regards to the Hawaiian people. Now, the word ukulele comes from two words in the Hawaiian language, uku meaning flee, and lele meaning to jump. Not 100% sure where this connection comes from. It could be something to do with how the fingers bounce around on the strings as you're playing. Some people felt that it was probably a derogatory term used for the advisor of the king at the time, who was a big promoter of this instrument. But by 1900, there was mass production of these instruments all across Hawaii, and it became so popular. 1915 or so, the music had hit the rest of the U.S., and people were loving it. They had performed some at an expo in Panama, I believe, and that just kind of took over. And yeah, I mean, now 100 years later, more than 100 years later, there's still mad love for the ukulele, man. It's a popular instrument. There's been some iterations of it or performers that stand out in my mind. First off, this one's kind of a bizarro one, but Tiny Tim. If you know Tiny Tim, he was a creepy dude, but he put out this song that was a bit of a hit back in the day, and it's bizarre. His weirdo singing, and of course he's playing the ukulele. Tiptoe Through the Tulips. It's a bizarre little song for sure. Next one, a man by the name of Israel, and I'm gonna have a hard time with his last name, Kamakawayo. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I apologize to the late singer. Big boy from Hawaii. I think he weighed in over 700 pounds. He took this one into the stratosphere. He put out a couple of songs, but this is probably his most famous, his rendition of Over the Rainbow. And it's beautiful, man. It just embodies that Hawaiian kind of laid back vibe, but it's perfect. I really dug this. I think this one came out or was released as well on a soundtrack to 51st Dates, and that really brought it out huge. And yeah, unfortunately, like I said, Israel died in '97. So yeah, other artists. George Harrison loved the ukulele. He had a collection of them, and anytime people came over to his house, he would invite them to play. And in fact, Sir Paul McCartney would often, I don't know if he still does today, but he was known for performing a live rendition of the song Something, which was written by George Harrison. And he would perform it solo, playing the ukulele, so just as a little head nod to and remembrance of his bandmate there. So I thought that was pretty cool. This next guy here, Jake Shimabukuro, probably mispronouncing that too, has been referred to as the Jimi Hendrix of the ukulele. And you can hear him playing his rendition of While My Guitar Gently Weeps here. And I mean, he's playing that beast like nobody's business. You don't normally hear the ukulele being played in this manner, but he's pretty awesome. I've checked him out on a few television performances, and he's taken this instrument to a whole new level, man. And then in recent years, a young gent by the name of Feng Yi made several performances on television. Pretty awesome himself. A little bit of a prodigy. He's just a young lad. I can't remember where he comes from. This is his song called The Millennium Falcon. Little Star Wars head nod there, but the kid's got some skills. So yeah, there you go. A random history of the ukulele. And who knew it came from Portuguese roots? I just always thought that was a Hawaiian instrument since forever. So I found that one kind of interesting. Anyways, moving on to the history of another instrument that this is more about the name of the instrument than anything, but we'll get into it. We're talking about a sergeant in arms by the name of Bob Burns. Now, Bob Burns was somewhat of a comedian, and although he was a adept sharpshooter, I believe, in the Army, he was much more well known for his musical capabilities and his comedic stylings. So at some point in time, while playing in a jazz band with the military, he had picked up a length of gas pipe, and he blew in it, and it made a really weird sound, and he loved it, and he started messing around with it, and ultimately fashioned an instrument, if you can call it that. It was a long tube with another tube inside it, and then a big bell on the end. And I think I can actually, no, I can't show you a picture yet because it'll give it away. But anyway, he would often perform with this thing, and it almost had like a trumpet-like sound or like a trombone-like sound, but a really, really low tone in it. And he would use it sort of like a slide whistle, if you will. And it became extremely popular. A little bit of a novelty, but numerous toy versions were made for the kiddies and sold all over the place. And yeah, now, at this point in time, that instrument is kind of lost in history. Nobody's really, talking about it. It wasn't the greatest sound that it was produced. I'll play a bit for you in a sec here, but there are some other things I can tell you about it there. Whoop! Sorry. I should really have put on Do Not Disturb on my phone. I can't believe that's the first time that's ever happened when I'm doing this. Sorry, guys. So let's see here if I can pull up a little bit of Bob Burns' infamous instrument that's been lost to history here. Here we go. So there you go. He's kind of playing a bit of Oh My Darling. Sounds sounds like a big old fart to me, but anyways, that was Bob Burns and his instrument there. So as time went on, like I said, it kind of got lost. But during World War II, an anti tank rocket launcher was introduced, and it was a very successful weapon against the tanks called the M1. And a number of the soldiers started nicknaming this weapon with the name of Bob Burns' instrument, and that, of course, was called the bazooka. So, kind of weird. I think most people know what a bazooka is nowadays, but originally the bazooka was an instrument. And then now I think you hear the name bazooka, you're not thinking music, you're thinking a weapon, right? So here's actually a advertisement for Bob Burns. It says the snappiest, zippiest, jazziest is Sergeant Robbie Burns' bazooka. So you can see him standing there with his crazy little instrument that sounds like a big old fart. So there you go. Crazy, eh? Weird history there. I found that one interesting anyways. So we'll carry on to something completely different as always. This is a group called Phoenix with a little song called Listomania. And I don't know if anyone knows that term, but I'd heard this song many times and thought the name was odd, but didn't really know what it was referring to. Turns out, Listomania was sort of akin to the Beatles mania of the 60s there. What was his name? Franz Liszt? No. Yes, Franz Liszt was a piano player, and he went on some serious tours across Europe, and I don't know, he had this electrifying presence. Really good guy. He's a Hungarian dude, said to have gone on one of the Mother of All concert tours. Apparently he was a real good-looking chap, I don't know, and quite a performer. And it turns out that people went mad for his performances, much like you can see in footage of the young ladies when the Beatles came to North America, freaking out and swooning and passing out, and just, you know, this is long before the term groupie existed, but Franz Liszt had many, and they followed him around. He did some different things. He was the first person to put his piano sideways so that you could see him and watch him perform before it was turned the other way. So kind of interesting. And he also, I think, was one of the first people to play without the aid of sheet music. He just memorized stuff and played. So I'm going to play a little rendition of one of his songs by a man by the name of Lang Lang. Now, this is not Franz Liszt. He performed a long time ago. We don't have any recordings of such concerts, but anyway, you might recognize this tune. This is Franz Liszt. But anyway, he truly was the prototype of the performing artist that we see today. He won the hearts of many adoring fans and played numerous benefit concerts for worthy causes. So he was a cool guy. And people were so fanatical about him. There are reports of women going to throws over an empty cup that Franz had put down. And so these ladies actually battled it out over him. And I don't know who got the cup, but and often people would attempt to snag cigar butts that he had discarded as souvenirs because they had touched his greatness. So crazy people. Speaking of crazy, the little safety dance by the men in hats, men without hats, sorry, old school. This is something that I stumbled upon that I guess I had heard about randomly, but I didn't really pay too much attention to it or know what it was about. This is going way back to 1518. It was something called the Dancing Plague. And it turns out that somewhere in Strasbourg, like I said, back in 1518, our record keeping wasn't the greatest, so it's difficult to know what's legit, but what we do know for sure is, like, one day this one woman just started spontaneously dancing out in the street, and she couldn't stop, and she just kept dancing. And as things continued, more people joined her and seemed to be caught up with this frenzy of dancing, and they couldn't stop. And a number of people were hospitalized, and people attempted to help them, but people kept dancing. And there are even reports that some people danced to their deaths. They became so exhausted and dehydrated and whatever that they died from dancing. Now, it's hard to substantiate that, but we do know that this happened. And like I said, the reports are all over the place. It's unsure of the number of people. It's anywhere from 40 to 400, so there's a pretty big gap there, but kind of a weird thing. Like, what the heck was happening here, right? Suddenly people all dancing. Really weird. I imagine back then, 1500s, people probably would have explained this in a various number of ways. Perhaps, mystical means, or maybe these people were possessed or something of that nature. But there are some modern day theories on what occurred here. And there have been other instances of this. This is just probably one of the more famous ones. And the more modern day kind of attempt at explaining this would be that these people had been suffering from food poisoning. Now, that seems odd, right? How could food poisoning cause people to dance? Well, way back when, this was a common thing that would happen. There's a particular type of fungus called ergot that can grow on wheat, and that ergot fungus contains something called lysergic acid. Now, lysergic acid is one of the bases to a well-known drug today known as LSD. So there's a theory that perhaps these people had ate bread manufactured from wheat that had been infected with this fungus, and they were actually just out of their minds, and that's what caused this spontaneous dancing. Not sure if there's any truth to that, but that theory has come up numerous times. In the case of some of the Salem witch trials, they thought maybe that was the explanation for some of the bizarre behavior that was reported. I also read a number of years ago about the cases of lycanthropy, which is werewolfism, in Europe way back when. They thought that maybe there wasn't any werewolves, but maybe there was people that were just messed right up running around thinking they were part of or something. So I don't know. It could be true. There's also a lot of ideas about this sort of mass psychogenic illness or mass hysteria, which can often happen when people are under a lot of stress. And there's numerous cases over history of this happening. And, where they were, in medieval times, this was not a good place to live. People were impoverished, people were famished, there was a lot of disease and starvation, and so people were pretty under stress, and they also happened to be pretty superstitious. So many people could have in some weird way become hysteric and felt the compassion to dance. Pretty strange. And this idea has come up numerous times. There's a band called Three Daft Monkeys that actually wrote a song all about it.
Let me tell you a curious tale
Called Days of the Dance. So there you
in
go.
Strasbourg. The year was 1518.
It's even come up in one of the original Smurf episodes.
To dance. The solitary
And
figure
as
of
well
Frau Trevor
in
moved through space in a
one of the Scooby-Doo shows, they actually referred to the plague, the dancing plague. So yeah, although as long ago, it seems to keep coming up, and many other shows and different things have referred to the dancing plague. So there you go, man. Kind of a weird little historical thing there. All right, moving on. I was going to talk a little bit about the mother of the MP3. Now, I'll play a little jam by her. Her name is Suzanne Vega, who you might know. Now, you probably know this song if you were around in the 80s, a little tune called Luca. I think it got overplayed. But in particular, we're probably going to talk about this tune by her. A little tune called Tom's Diner. So, classic tune. It's an earworm for sure, man. It's got in my head more than once. But this has a curious history to it, and it has a little something to do with the MP3. So I talked a few weeks ago about the MP3, and just for the sake of my talk, I'll explain a little bit, but the MP3 is the sort of format that is ubiquitous and well known today, but it's a computer file of music. Now that music has been extremely compressed so that it's portable and small enough to use easily and store. And in particular, that ability to compress it is what we're involved with. And the reason they needed to compress it is otherwise these files would be just massive. But the MP3 revolutionized music. It enabled us to, there would be no iPod without the MP3, right? It made it super duper easy to transfer and share and do all kinds of stuff with it. So pretty amazing. So back to the mother of the MP3, Miss Suzanne Vega, and her little nursery rhymey song, Tom's Diner. It turns out that a mad scientist looking dude, Carl Heinz, was working on an algorithm to compress musical files in order to make them manageable. And he was working with a team in a lab somewhere, and on the radio comes on a little Tom's Diner. And he heard that, and he thought, that's perfect. This will be the song that I use. If I can compress that and make it sound good, then I can do it with any song. So he worked on it, and was not an easy process. It probably took 1,000 different listens, if not more, and attempted to compress it but maintain that sound. And several go-arounds created just a monstrous distortion, sounded like The Exorcist or something like that. But eventually they perfected it, and that eventually became the standard for music reproduction. And so quite amazing is the fact that Miss Suzanne had no idea. She didn't find out that she was the impetus to that file format until years later, in 2000, she was reading a random magazine, Business 2.0 or something like that, and read an article about Mr. Hines and his experimentation. So yeah, pretty crazy. So kudos to the mum of MP3s, Miss Suzanne Vega. And I'm gonna shut that song down because it, like I said, is a bit of an earworm and it will get stuck in my head for an eternity. And just a fun fact side note here, that Tom's Diner that she's singing about is a real place. It's called Tom's Restaurant, though, and it's on 112th and Broadway in New York City, and it is the same restaurant that's featured constantly in the Seinfeld episodes. So there you go. That's Tom's Diner, man. All right, one more for you guys. I don't know how long I've been rambling on for, but I think I gotta get skedaddling here. This one is just more of a public service announcement maybe or something. But I thought for a while that I was going off the rails on the crazy train, man. I noticed I got a lot of fans, not people who like me, but I mean fans that push air around in my house, and I like them, especially when I'm going to sleep. Gotta have a fan on, right? It just helps a little bit of that white noise, and it's soothing. So I started to notice that oftentimes as I was laying my head down to sleep, nothing really going on, but that fan noise, I would often hear what I thought was music. And I thought, what the heck is going on? Am I hearing things? Am I losing my mind? Well, it turns out this is a fairly common occurring thing. And it comes down to our ability to process things. So we often have this occur in other ways with vision, and I think everyone's looked up at the clouds in the sky and said, oh, that looks like a dragon, or that looks like this, right? So our minds do this all the time where there's random information coming in. We form patterns. We see patterns where they don't necessarily exist. Well, it turns out the same thing happens with sound. And so something like the white noise of a fan going, sometimes our brains will interpret that coming in, and it searches for a pattern, and tries to recognize pattern, and it finds the closest match, and then it processes the incoming sensory information to enhance that apparent match. So that's what was going on with me. It's something called pareidolia, or sometimes known as musical ear syndrome or something like this. So it's a fairly common thing. So if you've ever experienced it, don't worry, you're not losing your mind, nothing's going on. You know, there are some instances where there is something truly neurological going on and you might be having some problems, but for the most part, that's a pretty normal event. So no worries there. Well, like I said, I think that's about all the time I have. I'm gonna skedaddle here, guys, but I'm glad to be back, glad to be shouting out to y'all once again, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Be cool, people. Take it sleazy. Catch you on the flip side. Peace.